Don Thousand, the great Barian deity himself in all of Barian world. Some say that his power was absolutely limitless. He was the genius manipulator, a massive threat to the whole galaxy. But what exactly did make Don Thousand such a threat in the first place anyways? Well, boy, do I have the story to tell you finally to how exactly that whole happened. Now for those who actually already seen the YGO ZEXAL manga anime, you would already technically know this. But for those who do want to know, and or want to hear it again, then here's the story. Now as you already know that Astral World was the main world originally when it came to existence, right? However, during my past videos, especially when I talked about Elephas for example, when Elephas was actually talking about chaos energy being a massive threat to the Astral World, that chaos energy specifically was actually got discarded and became exiled from the world of Astral World. However, this became a massive grave mistake, which is something that pretty much that Astral World should never have done, because that only made things much more worse. Within this particular chaos energy that they discarded, it manifested into its own aggressor, transforming it and being merged into a whole new world in its own universe, in the galaxy, Barian world. But that wasn't the only thing that the chaos energy actually provided in just creating its own world. It had its own deity, its world, and that is when Don Thousand came to existence. So technically speaking, you could possibly say that Don Thousand is technically the only Barian to ever exist ever since when the chaos energy actually got discarded from Astral World. Literally the only Barian to ever exist. And no Barian existed but him. He was alone and pretty much the only one around. So the one thing that Don Thousand did was to take back that world and rule both of those worlds. But the only way that he needed to do that was to obtain the card itself. The card that can be able to rewrite history and manipulate all of reality itself. The Numeron Code. Astral, of course, himself wouldn't allow him. So they had to duel for the Numeron Code and to see whoever was victorious in changing the course of history. But during that fight, in a duel where Astral will be able to draw one particular card that only not just destroyed Don Thousand, but also himself, his memories were then actually scattered into millions of pieces, lost along with the Numeron Code. Until eons later, when Earth was discovered, Don Thousand waited patiently in order for the 7 Mytherian numbers to lay into the right hands. And I'm pretty sure you would know who I'm talking about. Shark, aka Nash, Rio, aka Marin, Mizar, Vector, Grog, Alito, and Duman. Each of these 7 unique people that held onto these cards was assigned for Don Thousand to not only to soon be able to make his attack, but to also manipulate them and brainwash them into believing that they were serving him. And for all of Barian world. Now technically this all happened while basically that Astral sealed Don Thousand away in the Barian seas. But throughout all that time, in spirit, Don Thousand, while he was sealed away, tried to use some of his power to at least be able to communicate with these 7 people, thus making them into his 7 Barian emperors of Barian world. Thus, he also created these 7 Barian numbers for them, which also granted them massive, immense power. Now also during the battle between Don Thousand and Astral, Don Thousand actually be able to embedded a shard of essence into Astral, which then later manifested as number 96, Dark Mist. And I'm pretty sure you know the rest. As for those who don't, years later on, Vector released Don Thousand from his seal from the Great Barian Seas, making a deal with him in order to become the strongest duelist and become a deity by becoming one with Don Thousand, and also taking the powers of the rest of the 7 Barian Emperors. Which of course that potentially backfired, which then Don Thousand just took all the power back, fusing Earth with Barian World, also trying to destroy Astral World along with it. But then of course that all ended with, Yuma, Astral, Kite, and Shark, aka Nash, to finally put a stop to him. Resulting into one other final battle between Yuma and Nash, because Don Thousand actually somehow allowed Shark to inherit all of his power, making Shark not the only emperor left, but also the next new Barian deity. Along of course with the remaining powers of the rest of the 7 emperors that have fallen. Now also again, coming back to the duel between Astral and Don Thousand eons ago, I do always had to wonder with myself, what deck was Don Thousand using while dueling against Astral? Because a lot of people actually never really thought about this, but we've always kind of tend to wonder, like, what exactly did he use against Astral? What was his deck originally before he actually then used the Numeron deck against Yuma and Nash? Now, I had a few options in particular to what exactly that deck might actually be. So I had a bit of thought, and to be able to figure out what exactly could fit Don Thousand before he used the Numeron deck. Well, I had a few areas. Evil Swarm, which would actually make a lot of sense because due to the fact it is, Don Thousand is of course the embodiment of pure evil itself, along with all the chaos energy. That was one idea. Then I thought about the Infernoids. The Infernoids, that would probably make a lot of sense because they also evolve with very dark attribute monsters as well. But then I realized something that also came into mind. Thinking about the ace monster that he had, Chaos number 1000 Numeronius and Chaos Imaginary number 1000 Numeronius Numeronia, they are light fiend type monsters. While the rest, like the Numeron Gates for example, were basically machine type monsters, but they were also considered to be light attributes as well. Well, except for Chaos Gate number 1, which was actually a dark attribute monster. But apart from all that, I tried to figure out a way that actually also includes not just dark type, but also suited to Don Thousand's liking, because most of his monsters that he used were like at least mostly light attributes with the extra deck. So the best deck archetype that I actually thought of was actually the Arch-Fiend Smith. These are literally all fiend type monsters that are actually literally a light attribute. However, apart from the fact that they actually have, they have link monsters in the extra deck, but maybe you can possibly discard them and maybe just add like maybe a few Exceed monsters, for example. You can use like maybe perhaps like Chaos number 5 Chaos Chimera Dragon, which is what Vector used, and also you can probably even add in some of the Don Thousand cards that Vector was given when he was merged with Don Thousand. Which, by the way, I will get to that part in a minute. So yeah, maybe perhaps you just use one of those, and maybe even adding some of the other numbers that Don Thousand might have probably used, just like Vector perhaps, like Master Key Beetle, Jin Buster and its Chaos counterpart King Overfiend, Manipulator of Strings or Manipulator of Chaos. Any of those numbers will work perfectly for the extra deck for Don Thousand before he obtained the Numeron code. Also, someone did actually make a deck specifically meant for Don Thousand that involves with the specific archetypes that each of the 7 Barian Emperors used specifically, which I'll bring up the thumbnail and the title of that, and I'll put the link in the description below. It is pretty clever, but I feel like that's a little bit, I don't know whether that's too much or whether that's like, a bit of a very obvious choice to do, but I don't feel like it's the best one to do. You could go ahead and check that video out if you like. I feel like Fiend Smith is a little bit more appropriate due to the fact that, apart from the fact that it has fusions, which he could use, but also the fact with some link monsters which have not existed in the ZEXAL timeline that might have to be replaced until like later on further down the track, until when, Vrains comes into play. Though in fairness, it actually does kind of fit the theme for Don Thousand originally. Before he was in like this very powerful state, he was just basically this gigantic monstrous fiend himself. before actually regaining his true form later, eons later. Now, let's actually take a look into his proper deck. The deck that he used when he dueled against Yuma and Nash. Now, as we all know, you pretty much already figured out by now that his Numeron deck, when he actually uses the Numeron code to fuse Earth with Barian World, he uses these cards. The Spellfield Numeron Network, which is basically the card that rewrites all the cards that your opponent plays, but only once per turn. Which, unfortunately, that doesn't happen in the original TCG. However, it does allow you to play certain Numeron codes that you can actually play in your deck instead of from your hand, allowing to play spell-specific spell cards like Numeron Colleen, which actually brings out the 4 gates 1 through 4, especially Numeron Chaos Gate, Numeron Chaos Ritual, which is of course meant to be used for specifically Chaos number 1000 Numeronius, and of course its evolved form, which is a rank 13 Exquisite monster just like Elephas, Chaos Imaginary number 1000 Numeronius Numeronia. Of course, there's the spell card also Numeron Storm along with it. Now, some of the other cards that we have not seen specifically yet, which has not been printed out, especially when we see these 2 specific cards in the anime, Numeron Exceed Revision and Numeron Spell Revision, which originally were trap cards. And each of these 2 trap cards were able to, 1, with Exceed Revision, rewrite an Exceed monster, destroy it, and place a different monster in the field. And the same thing goes for Spell Revision, where it basically destroys one spell card and replaces it with another from the deck. Now, these 2 cards specifically, as I said, have not actually been printed out into the TCG, like, at all. However, there are possibilities to also probably bring out more revision trap cards just like these 2. Now, whether or not also that these 2 trap cards will be presented as trap cards, or Konami at some point may change them into spell cards instead, since due to the fact that Numeron Network only allows to play, well, Numeron spell cards only in the TCG. So that's also another thing to also think about. You can also create other specific Numeron revision cards, like specifically for like all of the other special summoning methods, such as, for example, Numeron Fusion Revision, Numeron Synchro Revision, Numeron Pendulum Revision, Numeron Link Revision? Heck yeah, why not? What about a Numeron Ritual Revision? That would be pretty neat. Or heck, since they've done a Numeron Spell Revision, do a Numeron Trap Revision. And why stop there? You can also do like a Numeron Effect Revision that literally replaces effect monsters specifically with another effect monster. And you can even do Numeron Normal Revision, which basically also replaces a normal monster. And when I'm talking about normal monsters, I'm talking about like the gold-covered monsters, you know, or Dark Magician, Blue Eyes White Dragon. I'm talking about those kind of cards. Which actually, in fairness, would actually be very useful if you had cards like those. Because thinking about it, like, since I mentioned Dark Magician and Blue Eyes White Dragon, for example, or even like any of the other vanilla monsters, like, you know, Red Eyes Black Dragon, for example, Elemental Hero Neos, they're literally vanilla monsters. If you actually had a card that could actually rewrite the cards that your opponent plays and replace it with other just weak type of vanilla monster cards, that would be pretty much one of the most insane powerful things that you could do, especially if you could add it to the Don 1000 deck for Numeron. Don 1000 could literally become the most powerful deity, not just with Exceed monsters or even spells. He can probably be the most powerful if he used the Numeron code to rewrite the special summoning methods of summoning, or even just normal summoning of effect monsters and normal monsters plus trap cards. Like, can you see how freaking broken this is? It's like pretty much the most overpowered deck if Konami were to ever print cards that could actually potentially work like this. And of course, don't forget the other Don 1000 cards that Vector uses specifically, which technically speaking, they pretty much are probably going to also work for Don 1000 specifically, since they have his name on him, which of course is Rank Up Magic Admiration of the Thousands, Contract with Don 1000, and Don 1000's Throne. Even though technically speaking, Don 1000 never used those cards himself, apart from Vector, I do still think that Don Thousand could be capable of still using those cards specifically since they do belong to him. But as you can see, that Don Thousand is nothing more but a character that easily wanted to bring back what was rightfully his, infusing the power of chaos energy within Astral World, which is why he wanted to take Astral World for himself and probably destroy it and make it into his own. Which also probably would be the reason why he also fused Earth with Barian World, so he can gain more energy with it when he used the numeric code to fuse the two planets. Allowing him not to only just do that, but also have the power to cross between dimensions, allowing him to destroy the Astral World. And think about also the words that he actually told to Astral when they actually had the duel with Yuma and Nash. The reason why he probably might have said that is because he was once a part of that world. Like, think about it. Being the fact that he got discarded as the chaos energy within it, and it manifested into not just the Barian world, but also Don Thousand himself as the main deity of that world. He wanted to take it back for his own sake, because they needed each other. It's kind of like how number 96 actually mentioned this to Astral. You are light, I am dark. We both need each other. And that also pretty much confirms everything about what the chaos energy really needed within Astral World, which is why Astral decided to put a Barian World become one with Astral World again.
If you want to battle anyone, it should be Astral. It was his world that caused all this fighting. Astral World created Barian World, but it exiled countless souls to rid their world of all chaos.
But we had reason to. We hoped without chaos our world would be pure order.
You and the people of your world are fools. Order and chaos, like day and night, are inseparable. And attempting to split the two has set in motion the destruction of Astral World. Your people seem quite fond of working to hasten their own demise, especially you, Astral.
Especially when it came to what Elephas said in this scene right here about using the power of ZEXAL.
The only power that can save us is the power of ZEXAL. And thanks to you, Yuma, I have learned that ZEXAL can only come from true friendship. Even if that friendship is forged with the energies of both chaos and light.
So technically in the end, the chaos energy was necessarily needed in Astral World. Even though technically it might have been a problem at first, it still has its uses. The only question is now, due to my previous videos about would there possibly be a Yu-Gi-Oh! ZEXAL movie, and with the new evil that has arisen from the finale of the series, could it be possible that Don Thousand might have came back from the dead? I do not know, or maybe it might have been someone else. It could be anybody at this case. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know your thoughts about Don Thousand as a character. Do you think he's a good character? I honestly potentially think he is. If they actually went a little bit deeper for him as well, he'd definitely have a lot more sense into what his main role is within the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! ZEXAL series. So anyways, please click the video, click a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, click the notification bell to never miss a video, and I will see you next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, always, and as always, my name is Mad Dog, and may your days be mad and rad.